Welcome to the Ironwood Gym. Today we're going to continue talking about the box squat, and over the past few weeks I've put several videos out discussing different aspects of the box squat, and we're going to continue with that today. But today we're going to focus on who should utilize the box squat. And there's debates on this, on which athletes should use a box squat, which athletes shouldn't use a box squat, and it seems like every coach has a different opinion on this. So we're going to dive into some of these, and we're going to hit a few different groups of athletes, hopefully clarify some things. But first, before we can dive into the athletes, we need to define what we're talking about when it comes to the box squat. All right, so the box squat can be a very versatile exercise, but who you're working with may dictate how you have them perform the box squat, and how they perform the box squat is going to dictate what they're getting out of it. So that kind of leads to the loop. So what they're getting out of it should dictate who is going to utilize it. But these are three different types of box squats, obviously very different. Please excuse my lack of artistic ability and try to understand the point that I'm trying to get across. So in this one, this is only a view from the side. But this is your wide stance squat where you're sitting your hips back and your shins are staying vertical. Okay, and before I get into this, this is something that just drives me nuts, is that the high bar, low bar thing, please just toss that in the window, because bar position only makes a small difference in how you squat. What you do with your hips and your torso is far more significant to what you're getting out of the squat than where you put the bar on your back. Because I can put the bar in a high bar position and still squat like this. And I can put the bar in a low bar position and still squat like this. Even though that's contradictory to common belief. Get rid of the high bar, low bar terminology, and let's actually talk about what is going on in the squat. So that's what we're going to do here when it comes to the box squat. This is your wide stance, okay? Your shins stay vertical, your torso has more of an angle to it, more of a forward lean, but the bar position is still over the middle of the foot, which is gonna hold true, should hold true if you're squatting correctly at all in all squats, okay? Now this next one, this is gonna be more like a weightlifter style squat, where they're gonna sit down deep, they're gonna have a narrow stance, they're going to sit down well below parallel, but the bar again is staying over the middle of their foot. But you can see here, their torso is now more upright than the wide stance, and their shin angle, their knees are going forward, causing them to have a greater shin angle. This last one, oh man, this goes back to bigger, faster, stronger era. And believe it or not, it's still out there. There are NFL athletes that squat like this. I just saw some today on a video. I don't recommend this 95% of the time or more. I would not recommend this type of box squat. But in this case, you're going to have a very high box. You're going to sit back more, but because of the high box, you're never going to break parallel or get into a position that allows you really to utilize your hips. So you would still have a narrow stance with this. Your shins may or may not move forward depending upon how well you are at it and how well you're coached at it. So you may let your shins come forward more, maybe not, but you're going to be sitting high, and your torso is probably going to stay a little bit more upright than you would if you had a box squat where you were getting down to parallel. So those are your three different types of squats. Just to clarify one thing before I go on, this would be set probably around where the athlete or lifter is at parallel. So if we're talking about a power lifter, you would want to set it right at or possibly just below what their legal depth would be. So crease of the hip just below the top of the knee. For a weightlifter, utilizing a narrow stance, letting their shins come forward, you would probably want to set the box deeper. You could still set it right at parallel. That is not a problem. It just depends on what you want to get out of it. The deeper you go, you're probably going to get a little bit more hamstrings. You're going to get quads no matter what. okay, with letting your knees come forward and sitting down or sitting more straight down versus back, you're going to get your quads developed quite a bit. Now this here, it doesn't really matter, you know, you're on a high box. You're probably not getting a whole lot of hamstring work. Most of what you're going to, doesn't matter if you're sitting straight down or if you're pushing your hips back, your hamstrings just aren't going to come into play. They would if you got down to at least a parallel box or lower. Again, does not matter. Your shins going forward, not going forward, doesn't matter. Here, you're going to get almost all quad development. You're not going to get the same hamstring development that you would out of these two squats with a lower box or a parallel box. The box is just too high to allow for that. So those are your 3 basic squats. Now let's start looking at what groups of athletes could utilize the box squat and where they would fall kind of on this spectrum. All right, so the first group of athletes that I want to talk about is team sport athletes. And not necessarily just team sport athletes, I'll include some individual sports as well, but we're going to stay away from track and field because I'm going to put them to a separate group. So with your team sport athletes, and I'm talking football, baseball, basketball, field hockey, soccer, as much as some coaches don't like to admit it. Yes, soccer athletes can benefit from having stronger legs, believe it or not. I think strength coaches know that, or they should know that. I think most of them do. Going on to some of those individual sports, and I know I'm leaving a lot out, but going on to some of those individual sports, you know, tennis, golf, swimming, you know, any athlete that can utilize stronger hips, stronger legs, those are the athletes that I'm talking about. And the thing about team sports is that nearly all strength training that they do, is GPP. And there are exceptions, but it is few and far between. 99% of the weight room exercises that you're going to do, most likely, is going to be GPP. And if you don't know what GPP is, please go look it up. And it is not circuits. It's not sled dragging. All right? Throw those things out. Those are just tools that you use to enhance GPP for certain groups of athletes. So GPP is the general physical preparedness. Weight training, strength training is GPP for most athletes. So with that being said, none of this really matters. All right? Can they benefit from the box? Yes. How are they utilizing the box? Well, it depends what you want to get out of it. So if you want to strengthen the posterior chain, right here, go with the wide stance, have them sit back, push their knees out. That's going to help strengthen their hamstrings. It's going to help strengthen their glutes. It's going to help strengthen their low back, even their upper back to a certain degree. By having their knees out or their feet out wide, pushing their knees out, now you're going to get the hips and the outer hips involved, their abductors. Those are all good things for team sport athletes. I can't think of a reason not to have stronger hips or not to have stronger hamstrings. Okay? Those will benefit team sport athletes. The narrow stance. If they need stronger quads, this may be a good thing to do. It's not where I would go. I think I would choose other means to get their quad strength. Perhaps just squatting without the box with this style of squat. But you absolutely could utilize a box, have them sit down, still break the eccentric concentric chain. They would still receive benefits that they could carry with them to their sport. Remember, it's GPP. This, I wouldn't do. Could you have them do it in certain situations if you had a specific reason to have them squat higher? And don't say, I want them to utilize more weight. But yes, you could probably come up with some reasons, but most of the time, team sport athletes are going to fall on these two types of squats. Okay? Or at least that's where I think they should be. I would not utilize that old narrow stance, squat to a super high box just to handle more weight, because that's really all they're going to be getting out of it. All right, so the next group of athletes that I want to talk about utilizing the box squat is track and field. And within track and field, you essentially have 3 to 4 different groups of athletes. And if you want to divide all the throwers up, you could even have more. But I'm going to put it as 3 groups. You're going to have your throwers, you're going to have your sprints and jumps, and you're going to have your distance runners or your cross-country runners. So for the distance runners, if I were to utilize a box squat, I would actually have them do a box or a belt box squat. That's if we utilize the box at all, okay? And with that, I would set it right to about parallel. I'd have them use a wider stance. It's easier to teach, and it's simply to strengthen their with the belt squat, you're automatically going to get more, because of the position of the weight, you're automatically going to get more quads. So if you utilize a wide stance, now you're still going to get the hamstrings, you're still going to get the quads, you're going to get a little bit of hip involvement, but either way, it's going to be good for developing their legs and strengthening their legs. That is a good thing for distance runners, okay? So, but I would have them right at parallel. I would be over here with this whole line is going to be track and field, but I would have the cross-country runner squat with a wide stance with a belt squat on the box. You could actually put the cross-country runners squatting without the box. That would be fine. It would actually be great. It's just a matter of the tools that you have available to use. So with the next group would be the throwers. And the throwers, honestly, there's a pretty big difference between some of the throwers. So your shot putters are quite a bit different than a hammer thrower or a javelin thrower. But if I were to utilize the box squat, I would pretty much always use the wide stance. Now, with the hammer throwers in particular, I would go to a narrow stance, but I probably wouldn't use the box, okay? I would just use a front squat, have them squat nice and deep, get as much quad development as they can. But for most of the throwers, I would have them over here with the wide stance, squatting on a box to right about parallel, maybe slightly lower. It's going to be great posterior chain development, and it's from the back all the way down to the hamstrings, glutes, backs. Their quads can be trained in a ton of different ways. I mean, just simply have, because they never get down super deep, so they don't need to have a lot of super deep knee flexion or extension from a deep knee position. So push press is going to help develop that. Single leg exercise is going to help develop that. I think the majority of their squatting could actually come from a wider stance box squat. Okay, so next is going to be the sprints and jumps. And this would cause some controversy with the sprints coach or the jumps coach, because they look at it as they want everything kept in line. Okay, they want to see everything kept in line, but they actually opt for a higher squat a lot of times. And they're really robbing the athlete, the sprinter or the jumper, from a lot of benefits by going high all the time. Now this is where things start to differ, and even with the throwers, these things start to differ from the team sports, because you're starting to look at more specifics that compare to the sport, and you're starting to move a little bit away from that GPP into some special aspects of strength training. In my book, it's still going to qualify as GPP, but it's not as general in nature as it is for team sports. Okay, it's getting to be a little bit more on that special side. It's starting to shift down that spectrum from specific to special to general. We're getting more in between the general and the special here. The track coaches will like to look at this joint angle, okay, and compare it to what they're going to be seeing on the track or when they're jumping. High jumpers, they love to have them squat very high. I'm not going to get into that to an extreme amount here. I'm just saying what they like. I will get into different reasons maybe in a future video. But if you look at the wider stance, this knee angle right here is almost precisely what you're going to see when they're on the track or when they're jumping, whatever the case may be. The difference between this and this is superior, far superior for developing the hamstrings. Have you ever had a sprinter that didn't need stronger hamstrings? Same with the jumpers. Okay, they need strong hamstrings to an extreme degree. By strengthening the hamstrings, it improves performance, and it also helps prevent hamstring strains. Now, preventing hamstring strains is a very multifaceted thing that you have to work on, but this is is part of that process, and it's also part of the process of improving performance. What the track coaches don't like is the fact that they're out at a wide stance. Again, this is not specific training. We're still in between the special and general. We haven't got to specific. Okay, most things in the weight room, even for track and field, still doesn't break that line into specific training. So it's not that big of a deal that they have a wide stance. It is a big deal that we are stressing the hamstrings to a very high degree in a way that's going to strengthen them. And it's going to help them improve from a performance standpoint. And we can look at that knee angle and say that the knee angle is very similar to what they're going to see on the track. So in my book, this is always going to be my favorite way to have sprinters and jumpers squat in the weight room. Does it mean I wouldn't ever have them squat with a narrow stance? Oh, I absolutely would. I would have them do that. I wouldn't have them squat to a box. When we do that, we take the box away. I'd still have them squat deep. But from a box squat perspective, this is what we would do, and it would probably be our main form of squatting. All right, so we've looked at two different groups of athletes. We've looked at team sports, which encompasses a lot of different sports, including some individual sports. And then we've looked at track and field, which is kind of a special case when it comes to how you're training them in the weight room, especially when it comes to squatting. So now we're going to start moving in more to the strength athletes, and we're going to focus on the first one is going to be two groups put together, and that's going to be Strongman and CrossFit. And the reason I'm putting both of these together because there is a lot of similarities between these two sports. In fact, if you watch some of these CrossFit competitions, they're basically doing strongman activities at just a lower load, or maybe for a lower load and possibly a lot more reps. But they're doing the same type of stuff. Okay? For CrossFit and Strongman, I think they could benefit from both of these, possibly even this narrow stance. The thing about both of those sports is that there is no set event that they have to squat a certain way. There may be limits on their squatting, and there are different rules about that, but when you get into it, a lot of the events that they do can benefit still from having that wide stance and developing their posterior chain. Could they still do this as well? Squat with a narrow stance? Yes, because most of their squats, when they go into the competition, whether it's Strongman or CrossFit, they're going to be squatting with a narrower stance. So yes, they do need more quad activation. I could even see the benefit of having a higher box. I wouldn't go crazy with this. Okay, I wouldn't go back to where they're barely getting to 90 degrees knee angle, but squatting to a higher box would be beneficial. I've seen strongman competitions in which some of the competitors never broke parallel. So, especially for the I haven't really seen that in CrossFit, but I have seen it in strongman. So they could actually put up a pretty good argument to squat on a higher box at times and even utilize a narrower stance with that squat. The biggest thing you have to realize is that you want to, however you do these narrow stance squats, you want to mimic exactly what you're going to do in competition. Even if the depth changes, your squat style should be the same. Where you would differ is when you go to this wide stance, and that would be specifically for developing the posterior chain in a little bit more general manner, that you're going to take that strength and apply it to multiple different events that you're going to have to do, where these are going to be more directly related to how you're going to squat in competition. And yes, these would carry over to other events as well. I'm just saying that these two are closer to the way you're going to squat, so it's going to have a more specific carryover in that manner. So CrossFit, Strongman actually would be performing or could benefit from all three types of box squats that you see there. All right, so we've now covered 4 different groups of athletes. The 5th group that I'm going to put up there is weightlifting. Weightlifting as in the snatch and the clean and jerk, Olympic style weightlifting. And the first thing that I know a lot of weightlifting purists are going to come out with is, no, you should never box squat as a weightlifter. Why not? Why can't you? And I'm going to get into this on another video. It'll be kind of a theoretical video or a theoretical discussion of box squatting for weightlifters. But weightlifters can benefit from the box squat. It's just not going to be as clear cut as maybe a powerlifter. So this I would definitely toss out. I wouldn't do that at all with weightlifting. This obviously is going to be your more specific to how they're going to squat. But remember, when they get into competition, they're sinking down into a very rapid front squat or a very rapid overhead squat. So performing a narrow stance box squat with the bar on their back, I don't know how much direct carryover they're going to get. And I say that in an honest sense, I don't know. Because the speed of this and pausing and sitting on the box may not carry over well to that rapid drop into the bottom of their squat where they have to immediately freeze the weight. You could make an argument, and Louis Simmons talked about this, and I think that this is very on point, that the box squat essentially allows you to preserve or trains the body to preserve the stretch reflex. In other words, if you sit on the box, let's step back for a second. When you're receiving the weight in a clean or you're receiving the weight in the snatch, you're actually performing a very powerful stretch reflex in the bottom. If you time it just right, you're going to be able to stand up with a lot more force due to that stretch reflex. If you don't time it right, that's when you see lifters pause on the bottom or reposition or double bounce, which is all legal in weightlifting. There's no rule that you can't do that. In those cases, I don't think that this narrow stance box squat is really going to help a ton, although I could make a pretty good argument for it still in those cases. The other case and that argument would be that they are now having to come from a stopped position. The difference being is that here with the box squat, if they sit on the box, they're losing some of that stiffness. They're losing the tightness in their quads. They're losing the tightness in their hamstrings and their glutes because they're going to release on the box. When you're double bouncing out of the bottom or when you're pausing in the bottom and readjusting, you are under constant tension. That tension never comes off. So how much is breaking the eccentric concentric chain going to help in that situation? I don't know. I would think that it wouldn't help a ton. It might help some. However, when you look at the stretch reflex as far as receiving the weight and trying to get it immediately out of that hole, one of the nice things about the box squat is that it trains the body to essentially preserve the stretch reflex for an extended period of time. So when you sit on the box, normally you can sit, release, explode off. Over time, your body is, if you train to come down fast, pause, release, contract, come off, over time your body is going to preserve that stretch reflex. So it's not going to lose it all as soon as you sit on the box. So with that said, it could help coming out of that hole. However, you don't have to have a preserved stretch reflex because you're not going to sit down there. So I'm iffy on this one for weightlifters. I would actually have them do this one, but probably not close to competition. It would still be a decent way, or a solid way, of strengthening the hips, strengthening the posterior chain, which over time they could transfer that strength to their actual sporting movements. So, and not necessarily the squat, it may come in strength for their pull. But regardless, I would utilize this to help strengthen their posterior chain. Would I use it close to competition? No. Okay, but farther out from competition to get that general base of strength up, yes, I would. So that's going to be weightlifters. Okay, I'm going to put them over here as far as the wide stance. This is a big question here, so I'll just put a question mark, and I know all this is running together. Hopefully you can see it okay, but it's starting to get kind of tight. So the last group is going to be your powerlifters. With powerlifting, okay, it depends on how you squat. You could take this box, elevate it if you use a narrow stance, so you're right at parallel or just below parallel. You don't really have to be 3 inches below like some federations think you have to do, or at least the judges think you have to be 3-4 inches below. That's not actually part of the rule book. So you would want to set your box so that you are breaking parallel. The crease of your hip does need to go below the top of your knee, but you could still squat with this narrow stance. If you're going to utilize the box to improve as a powerlifter, to improve your squatting as a powerlifter, your box squat needs to mimic your free squat. So whatever knee angle you have, whatever shin angle you have, whatever torso angle you have, that all needs to be the same most of the time. Okay? There are exceptions. You can come up with different reasons to vary that, but most of the time, to get that direct carryover and to get the most carryover, you want your box squat to mimic your free squat. So what you would do is you would set your box up higher, and I know this isn't going to work, at least not how a normal body is going to look, but you would set your box higher so that when you squat, everything would be more in line. So if you don't have as much forward knee movement, you would want to squat the same way. If you let those knees travel forward to get a lot of quads, you would want that to be the exact same way. Okay? If you have more forward lean, you want to have more forward lean on the box. All needs to be the same. Now what I would advocate for, and I think the reason most people don't have success with the wider stance, and the same rules apply. Okay, the same rules apply. If you're gonna squat with a wider stance on the box to train, then your free squat should be the same way. All right, your box squat should mimic your free squat. I think the reason a lot of people give up on this or say it doesn't work, that wider stance, is because they don't put enough time into it to really develop their posterior chain. If you develop your posterior chain through box squatting, when you go to free squat with the same wide stance and with the same torso angle, same shin position, you're going to see a tremendous carryover. Okay? It will definitely carry over. So powerlifters need to be on the box, and I know you're not going to be able to see this, and they're really between these, so I'll just redo that. Powerlifters are going to be here, and it depends on how you squat. But the benefits for a powerlifter should be, it shouldn't even be debated. If you have a coach that's telling you as a powerlifter you should never use a box, you really need to rethink the relationship with that coach, because the benefits of the box squat, they're just too tremendous for the powerlifter. Okay, because it allows you to squat the exact same way that you will in competition. It's going to ensure that you're squatting to the same depth all the time. It's going to allow some different variations in your training from the coaching standpoint to how you actually set up your workouts that you can't get by always free squatting. I'm not saying you should always box squat. I'm saying it should be a very integral tool into developing your squat. So hopefully this helps. Who should box squat? Anyone can box squat. Okay, it depends on the coach's philosophies, what they're trying to get out of the box squat. That's what makes a difference on who should use it and who shouldn't use it. But most athletes are going to be able to benefit from the box squat in some way. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments. Just have a comment, post it in the comments. I'll try to get back to you no matter what. But until next time, always be in the pursuit of strength.